afternoon. My fellow South Africans and citizens, a year ago, the formation of the multi-party coalition, now known as the Government of National Unity, filled our country with enormous hope. It followed the decision of the people of South Africa to remove the outright majority that the ANC had enjoyed in South Africa since the historic elections of 1994. But in last year's election, the people of South Africa sent a very clear message that they no longer wanted the ANC to do as they pleased, regardless of the consequences for our country. The people of South Africa said very loudly that they were tired of corruption, they were tired of grinding unemployment, and that they were tired of an economy that had not grown meaningfully for decades. Instead of one-party domination that had been known since that election in 1994, the people chose something different. They wanted multi-party cooperation and collaboration. In short, the people of South Africa wanted to see things change. And it was based on this mandate of change that the Democratic Alliance, after extensive introspection and inward discussion, made a decision to join the Government of National Unity. However, instead of upholding the wishes of the people by working in a collaborative, respectful manner with all parties inside of the GNU, the ANC has repeatedly undermined these principles. Time after time, it has slapped away the hand of cooperation and co-creation in favor of arrogant, narrow, partisan party political interest. Right from the beginning, the statement of intent was violated by appointing a bloated executive without consulting the DA on the other parties that were to be joining, in order to give the ANC more influence than the voters wanted it to have. President Ramaphosa has since signed destructive pieces of legislation into law that have far-reaching consequences for our economy and economic growth, as has been seen by the reaction from some of our largest trading partners. This was done without even the common courtesy of informing the fellow partners in the Government of National Unity about his intention to do so. He has presided over a disastrous budget process where the views and opinions of coalition partners were not taken seriously, and that the opposition to the ANC's proposed 2% VAT increase was simply waved away. There's been a refusal to enable a meaningful power sharing to drive collaborative growth and urgent reform of the country to create jobs. And that is why our unemployment statistics are sitting where they are, and why our first quarter of GDP growth has not come anywhere near the expectations that we would like to see it moving towards, the 3% that we've set ourselves as a target. And this week, without any significant forewarning or meaningful consultation, President Ramaphosa concocted an excuse to remove a DA deputy minister out of the blue because of his own failure to respond to a repeated request for travel permission. The hypocrisy of this conduct is even more galling when one looks at what sits around the cabinet table in terms of violations of law, of executive ethics code, and the ministerial handbook. It was the same President Ramaphosa who in 2020 issued a mere reprimand and salary docking to former Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula when she flew an ANC delegation to Zimbabwe in a South African military plane. To make matters worse, President Ramaphosa has now also defied the 48-hour ultimatum issued to him by his largest coalition partner to act on corruption in his own ranks. This was a golden opportunity for the President to demonstrate that action against those who violate the expectations of them in public office would be taken consistently and fairly in government. By doing so, he has now actively chosen to protect Minister Thembi Simelane for her alleged role in VBS looting. He's also chosen to protect Nobushle Nkabane after she has actively misled Parliament. And he continues to shield a whole cast of looters implicated in state capture. Just this morning, less than 2 hours ago, instead of taking action against state capture, the ANC has cleared Malusi Gigaba, David Mashlobo, Zizi Kodwa, and Cedric Frolic from all charges against them. Now, despite this pattern of double standards and abuse of power, DA members of the executive have remained clearly focused on the task at hand, on our commitment to deliver to the people of South Africa and to play a meaningful role in creating jobs, growing the economy, and ensuring good, clean, accountable government that delivers for the people of South Africa. And the strides that we've made in a number of portfolios, from agriculture, home affairs, public works and infrastructure, communications and digital technologies, as well as environment, and through hard-working deputy ministers like Andrew Whitfield, I believe has set a new standard of excellence for governance at national level. In some cases, DA ministers have literally achieved more in 12 months than ANC ministers did in 30 years. And perhaps this is the real source of the ANC's double standards towards the DA, because they know that the DA is succeeding. They know that the performance of DA ministers makes some of their contributions pale into insignificant. And, most importantly, they know that the opportunities for looting and stealing of public money are shrinking wherever the DA is present and wherever DA reforms are implemented. This flagrant double standard that protects the likes of Simelane and Nkabane but acts against Whitfield proves that in the ANC's universe, the only things you dare not be are competent, honest, and hard-working. But sadly, this is not an isolated incident. It is about a pattern of disrespect, arrogance, and double standards. The ANC has refused to implement Clause 19.3 of the Statement of Intent that requires sufficient consensus to resolve disputes, directly undermining the GNU and the original Statement of Intent. And the President's now refusal to act against corruption within his own ranks, but singling out as a priority a DA Deputy Minister, risks confirming that his oft-repeated public commitment to clean governments is a sham. Until he replaces words with action against corruption within his own ranks, the DA sees no further point in wasting our breath in endless talk shops with the ANC. For that reason, the Democratic Alliance's Federal Executive, which met at 1 p.m. today, has resolved to withdraw from the national dialogue with immediate effect. In the absence of a president who's prepared to take action against VBS looters and state capture accused sitting around the cabinet table, it is clear that the dialogue will be reduced to nothing more than a waste of time and money to distract from ANC failures. And this explains why they are so obsessed with it. It's clearly an electioneering ploy at taxpayers' expense to gloss over the serious crises that they have plunged South Africa into. The dialogue also has no constitutional standing whatsoever to take or impose decisions. Frankly, if the President cannot even dialogue sufficiently and meaningfully with his own coalition partners, there is little point to pretending that there's any substance to an ANC-run national dialogue. In fact, the President has repeatedly promised a breakaway to engage with GNU party leaders. But a year later, despite several promises that this would take place, nothing has happened. After every single crisis the GNU has faced, this so-called breakaway or Bosbarat has been mooted, plans are made, but never comes to fruition. Similarly, a proposed breakaway for the Cabinet to deal with how we interact with each other as Cabinet members and resolve disputes and disagreements that will inevitably arise in a government made up of more than 10 political parties. A year later, nothing has happened. No breakaway, no dialogue, and no mechanisms internally to determine how we deal with disputes between each other when they arise. Plus, I make the point that we have already had a national dialogue last year. It's called an election. And the people said very clearly in that election that they do not want to have anything to do with ANC one-party arrogance or domination. So, effective immediately, and until action is taken against those corrupt individuals, the DA will have no further part in this process. We will also actively mobilize against it in order to stop the obscene waste of 740 million rand of public money, starting with a call on all civil society bodies in South Africa to join us in demanding that the dialogue not proceed until President Ramaphosa fires ANC corrupt individuals in the national executive, as well as other delinquents. Because the reality is, no matter what the dialogue resolves, no matter how many noble resolutions it may take, and no matter how many feel-good moments it has, nothing will change in South Africa for the better if we keep the same people around the cabinet table who have involved themselves in corruption, maladministration, and misleading of Parliament. The people of South Africa should not be taken for fools. They know that any national dialogue is utterly meaningless if it's presided over by the criminals and the corrupt and those who provide a safe refuge for them. A second and critically important step that the DA is taking is to vote against upcoming departmental budget votes for the departments headed by Simelane Inkabane and other corruption-accused ANC ministers. And we will keep voting against those budget votes until those ministers are removed. In this way, the DA will strike a responsible and appropriate balance by allowing the broader GNU budget process to proceed to ensure the stability of the country, while forcing the ANC to act against those specific ministers who the public now demand are removed. I think it also bears mentioning that the DA will always act in a responsible manner and one in which puts the interests of South Africa first. The demonstration of that good faith was shown just this week in the National Assembly, where, despite the unilateral axing of Deputy Minister Whitfield, and despite the fact that the President had given me his word that I had 24 hours to notify Mr. Whitfield and brief my party about the step he was about to take, he simply fired off the letter sacking Deputy Minister Whitfield 3 hours later. Now, had we wanted to be petty, had we wanted to make this about positions over principle, it would be very easy to go into the National Assembly and vote against the Division of Revenue Act that took place this week. It was very clear from the panicked reactions during my speech that the ANC did not have the numbers, and they knew it, to get that passed. And yet, as I indicated in that speech, we are a reliable coalition partner. We respect our coalition partners. And when we give our word and we make undertakings, we stick to them. We do not treat our coalition partners with the same disrespect that they have shown to us repeatedly. If the ANC wants support for those budgets, they must replace the incumbent ministers with alternatives that meet the very high standard that the President has set for himself now through the axing of Andrew Whitfield. A further step that was considered by the Federal Executive was the tabling of a motion of no confidence in the President. We understand the concerns that many South Africans have about what would follow or could follow if Ramaphosa was removed from office. However, I want to be very clear and honest that in the DA's view, The actions of this last week and the fact that Minister Nkabane still sits in the cabinet, our view is that the President is failing to uphold his word to act against corruption, and unless he does so, he is going to make himself indistinguishable from the RET faction in his own party. Now, while the FedEx decided not to table a motion of no confidence at this stage, it is clear that the DA is in the process of losing confidence in the President's ability to act as a leader not only of the ANC, but of the GNU, of which we are the second largest component. I do want to take a moment to explain to citizens what this process involves, should it materialize in future. At every instance where President Ramaphosa has chosen to protect corruption accused within his own ranks while treating his coalition partners with contempt, he has sought to justify these actions by hiding behind something called presidential prerogative. He used the fact that the Constitution gives the President certain powers as a blanket excuse to take action against honest and hard-working members of the executive, while shielding those like Nkabane and others implicated in corruption and mismanagement. It seems that the ANC has never asked themselves the question about where this prerogative arises from in the first place. The President only has this prerogative because his partners in the government of national unity, without whose votes in Parliament he would have been reduced to being a one-term president. Unlike the ANC suggestion that this prerogative is some form of God-given right, it was only conferred temporarily on President Ramaphosa, the leader of a party with barely 40% support among South Africans, by the very parties in the GNU, including the Democratic Alliance. More specifically, without the DA's numbers in Parliament, President Ramaphosa would never have had such prerogative in the first place. And what was ours, given by acting in good faith, is ours to take away when shown bad faith. And if the ANC fails to course correct, the federal executive will seriously considering exercising our constitutional prerogative by tabling a motion of no confidence in the President. I want to speak directly now to South Africans. Last year, you all voted in your numbers to reconstitute government and set our country on a new path. The DA honoured your wishes and your intentions by ensuring that the statement of intent that formed the GNU was honoured. We love South Africa, and we work against tremendous odds every single day to act in the best interests of all South Africans. If this statement of intent had actually been implemented and honoured, the national government would by now be charting the course of reform and economic growth that voters wanted. However, because the ANC has failed to honour the agreement they signed, they continue to shield and protect corruption. Our withdrawal and mobilisation against the national dialogue, as well as our opposition against the budgets of corruption-accused ministers, is the first in a series of possible steps that are now on the table in an attempt to fix the GNU to align with the mandate that you have given all of us in the 2024 election. If the ANC wants to kick the DA out for fighting against corruption, well, so be it. But as long as ANC members implicated in corruption remain as members of the executive, misleading Parliament and committing other acts of malfeasance, the DA will not support their departmental budgets in Parliament, and we will not participate in the national dialogue. And if the ANC does not urgently change the way that it engages with its coalition partners, that we can fight corruption and start growing our economy and servicing the people of South Africa with good, clean, accountable government that delivers, well, then they imperil the very future of our country and our people. From the inception of the beginning of the GNU, the DA has always acted in the best interests of South Africa. It's now time that President Ramaphosa and the ANC do the same. I thank you.